All right. Hey, in the formula, the 4A formula, growth starts with honest assessment. But most leaders struggle to see their blind spots. Angelo Sisco's job is to sit across from CEOs, help them confront what's holding them back, and then build structure to move forward. This is leadership at a higher standard. Man, am I excited to have you on, Angelo. How are you today?
Oh, I'm grateful to be here, brother. I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Awesome, awesome, man. Well, look, in our community, we always love to start with like, what's the background, the ideation? How did this guy come to be who he is? And it's super exciting because we get to hear, what's the, innovation and the ideation of Cisco Advisors. So, and I know that's just one of the things that you do in the marketplace, but share with us a little bit of the background and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm 42. I've been an entrepreneur since 17. Not to applaud myself like I'm some great visionary. I just, at the end of the day, think I'm unemployable. And it's just difficult for me to do that. I really love autonomy and freedom. And that's what really led me down the path of entrepreneurship. When I was 21 years old, I was in a horrible motorcycle accident. I was hit by a landscaping truck and it resulted in the hospital for 2 months and rehab for five. I have 10 screws and a plate and all, new skin on my foot. And the reason I share that is I got up to about 300 pounds at 20, in my mid and early 20s. And I watched the movie 300. So that's kind of taking you to 2008 when I watched the movie 300. And I looked and I was like, man, how did these guys get in such great shape? And, here I am plugging away on the internet on my recliner, overweight, and saw that they worked out at a gym in Utah called Jim Jones. And they did this training methodology at the time that was really unknown or underground. It was called CrossFit. And so I
Mm.
watch a guy do a CrossFit video, John, and he deadlifted like 450 pounds, and then he muscled up and did these things on the rings, and then he did some cleans with like 250 pounds. Then he kicked up on a wall and did these inverted handstand push-ups that I never saw him before, and he just kept moving through it. And I said, me sitting on the recliner, I said, man, I got to figure out how to do this. And so January 5th, 2009, I started my first CrossFit workout. And I was just another level of commitment and resolve that I don't think I ever knew that I had. I lost 100 pounds in 7 months and was just another person. And I had a business at the time that was kind of a fun early 20s business. I had a business that was food trucks, and we would sell pizza outside clubs and bars in the city to drunk people. And that was my business. And at the time, by the time that weight loss came around, I had a couple trucks and four employees, so I had a lot of time to dedicate to exercise and fitness. And one day I was just helping out a buddy of mine lose weight and work out, and I was just like, man, this feels really good. Why can't this be what I do? And so
Mm.
I bought some medicine balls and bands and started training outside at a local park. That lasted for about 3 months till it got cold. And then I walked into a village center in Melrose Park where I grew up. And I said, these racquetball courts are pretty empty. You guys think I could rent one and train people there? And they were like, sure. And so I converted a little racquetball court space into a training studio, maybe trained 1 to 3 people at a time. And that lasted for about 10 months, and that was growing. And I was like, man, this is growing. What's the next thing to do? And that's when I opened up my first gym, O'Hare CrossFit, November of 2010. November of 2010, I opened up my first gym. And I was just on just after about a year, I found a mentor in Connecticut to really help me understand the gym business. And it was like the perfect collision of like I opened the gym before CrossFit became really popular. It became really popular. We blew up. I went from a 2,500 square foot facility to 5,500 square feet in about 2 years. And I just kept wanting to do more inside of this fitness world. I opened up a gym and another gym in 2015, a nutrition coaching company, an online programming company, like if you wanted to compete in like CrossFit as a sport. And that notoriety got me a lot of people asking me for help in business inside of the fitness world. And I would just help people out, and very similar to how it was in the beginning for training people. I was just doing it for free. I never thought it could be like a real business, but I wound up connecting with a very popular business podcast for gyms. And I said, why don't you guys help me get the clients and I will do the fulfillment of this coaching program? And lo and behold,
Mm.
within a year, we had about 400 gyms worldwide. I had 8 coaches working for me, and I built out a system that was really loosely built off EOS, right? But people in the gym industry had no idea what EOS was. But I just built a structure and a system for people to really plug into. And so I built that all up, and gosh, I got to go to South Africa to teach this stuff. I had a lot of popularity inside of the fitness world. And then in 2019, I woke up one day, and I don't know if it's one of these life moments, but that's when my first child was born. And I just felt like I didn't love the fitness industry anymore. You know, for me, John, it
Mhm.
always has to feel like there's something to learn, like there's something different, and I have to learn more. And that's really what I'm always eager for, is just to be better. And so I decided at that moment to get everything ready to sell. And so I started preparing everything to sell in 2019. And lo and behold, this thing came around that no one saw coming called COVID. And I wound up selling my last piece of business, my last gym, 2 weeks before lockdown. And
Wow.
you know, like people are like, man, your timing was impeccable. I'm like, this isn't timing. I just thought that this was over. And so sold everything. 2 weeks later, the whole world shuts down. I go, thank God I got this check. And I just was in a different place. And so I came home right when lockdown started, and I told my wife, you know, I've lived in a 1 mile radius my whole life. You know, what if we got out of Chicago for a little while and saw that what that was like? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. And so I had some coaching clients, and I moved to Southern California. And when I got there, I wound up starting to work with a lot of companies in the CPG industry, Vive Organic, Life Aid, a lot of these beverage and startups. And I got connected into this VC world where I would have never been there if I didn't live in California. And I was sitting in these
Mm.
board meetings with these people talking about 50, $100 million companies and how we're going to sell them and all of that. And during those 2 years, I tell my wife all the time, it felt like I got an MBA, because I would be able to just learn from these guys. Even though I was helping them in what I knew how to help, I didn't know that level of business. And so it was like a wonderful just learning experience for me. And then in June of 22, we came back to Chicago. You know, at the end of the day, you know, California was wonderful. I loved living by the beach in San Clemente. It's a little town in Orange County with surfers, and just sitting up there and enjoying that vibe. But I really missed our people, really missed my family. And so we came back in June of 22. I have a dear friend of mine whose business really grew in COVID, about 4x in COVID, and everything about his systems and processes were broken. And as I was planning on moving back, he was like, well, I could use your help if you come back. And so I came back and just did operating system stuff. I built a senior leadership team for him, helped him set everything up. It took me about a year, like inside the business. I don't really work inside businesses to that degree, but this was my best friend. And so no, you know, no limits for him. And so I put this all together for him. And then I just continued my business operating system practice and just kept growing that. And now, as it stands today, Cisco Advisors has three main offerings. The first is I do business operating system facilitation. I do quarterlies and annual plannings for a lot of companies, helping them get their structure, their people, their meetings, their data, all of that in place inside of small to medium sized businesses. I do one-on-one executive coaching. I work with either CEOs or a lot of times someone that's a director level and they want to bring them up to a C-suite level. I really love that journey of watching someone grow. And then I'm also a Vistage Chair, and Vistage is a
Mm.
CEO peer advisory group that I'm so fortunate to facilitate. So every month I get together with a dozen CEOs. We sit around and talk about our best practices. All the people are non-competing industries, so they feel very comfortable sharing everything that's really going on for them. And that's what my practice looks like now. I have a wonderful practice. I'm so grateful.
Look, so many twists and turns, right, in life. I think it's such an exemplary, like, relationship between being adjusting into times that go bad, and then flexibility, and then mindset, and then building out of ashes to then build something, right? And you put together, right, the mind frame of, hey, you saw something, you assessed it, right, and you were in a out of shape scenario, but then this time of your life, you said to yourself, oh, okay, a paradigm shift. I can take this and willingly go after something pretty special. But it took about 9 years to then shift into another gear, right? And I love what you're saying, because I think a lot of people forget that life is change, and it's continual change, and it's different motion. So when things change your life, don't get worried, get scared, get down, embrace it, right? And that's a hard thing for human beings to take, right? Um,
No, it is.
so I'd love to go into, obviously, building the business of the CrossFit. You saw an industry, prior to its really launch into more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? I mean, were you trying to figure out things? I know you mentioned a mentor. I think that's always a really neat story. This mentor, did you seek out two or three? Did you interview them? Did he approach you? What was that dynamic like?
Yeah. So for me, I just want to preface this. Whenever I have a problem, John, the first question I ask myself is who, not what or how. Like who could
Hmm.
help me? Like that. I think everybody has a word that they go to: who, what, or how. And for me, I'm a who person. I just need people to help me, and I have no problem admitting I don't know much, and I'm willing to pay for it or do whatever I have to do to figure it out. And so I did some research about who were at that time in 2011 or early 2012, who were the biggest CrossFit gyms and who was really doing it at a large scale. And the community was so small at that time. You go on a website that looked much like Craigslist and figure this out, because it was like a little affiliate map and do all that. And this guy, his name was Jason Leiden. He had a bunch of videos out, and I got a really good feel for him. And I messaged him from my AOL.com email, just to give you a little, like where we were in time. I messaged
Yeah.
him from my AOL.com email, and I said, listen, I'm from Chicago. I really want to learn. Is there a way that, you could send me programming and we could have talks about it and talk business? And he said, yeah, for sure. And we hit it off after a couple calls, and he invited me to Connecticut to come and learn from him. And so at the time, I really didn't have money to really do this. I really just barely was able to scrape enough cash to do it. So I flew to New York, rented a car, and I wound up sleeping in a car for
Wow.
my first two visits to learn from him. And I would just sit down and go, okay, tell me how you bring on new members. Tell me how do you advertise? Tell me how you market. And he would just be really transparent and show me everything. And I'm one of those kind of people, like when I get an opportunity, I try to squeeze every drop of juice out of it. So even when he would walk out of his office, I would just take pictures of all the books he read on his bookshelf and go, okay, I just need to read these so I could understand how he's thinking. And I just kept plugging with him. And this was maybe a 6-7 year relationship, and we're still dear friends. The truth is he wound up marrying my wife and I, and like very, very great relationship.
Oh,
Yeah, we
wow.
do. Yeah, he married us in South Africa in 2017.
Oh, wow.
Incredible journey with him. And just I would go and learn two or three things, and then I'd come back and implement them. I'd learn two or three things, and I'd come back and implement them. And by doing that and just trying, I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs we put pressure on ourselves, like we need to be super creative. And for me, I just think you just copy what's working for somebody else, and then by the time you're done learning how to copy it, you will figure out how to put your spin on it. But you don't need to put your spin on it right away, right? Success leaves clues.
Mhm.
Just follow the clues.
There's an acronym I love. It's called CASE, CASE, copy and steal everything.
Yeah, I'm
Right? I
not
mean,
embarrassed.
there's so much wisdom throughout the hundreds of years of humanity and thousands, right? Yeah, 100%. I remember getting into the financial world, and that was the first thing I did is look for those people, the who. So I feel like
Yeah.
I've spoken your language, and I've learned that way. I look for the right mentors, and that's why I was very intrigued by asking that. And what a cool journey, Go4CEO community. You just heard someone that reached out in a time where, even the resources weren't as good, but you found it, you asked the question. I always say in my book, I say, hey, look, ask a successful person for their time, for a question or something. And most of them are going to answer in a positive. I think 90%, 95% of successful people want to share how they've done it. So it's part of their journey, right? So it's really cool. So all right, look, you get to a point where you had the great timing or luck or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, but your sense was, hey, I need to get out of this business. 2019 into the right to the break of the pandemic. You make this change to California. You take some time to kind of involve yourself and really just get committed to this VC ecosystem world. You learn a ton because, yeah, look, the MBA is really a bunch of case studies. If you think about it, you're paying for, thousands of dollars to case study yourself to death, and then you get a degree. But you were in the minutia of everything, so you got it firsthand, and you saw those deals. So when you came out of that, now knowing what you could do, and you came to help your friend, what were the structures that you said to yourself, okay, hey, I'm going to build a business out of Cisco advisors? So in other words, you were the knowledge base, but where did you start to feel the growth opportunity when you got one, two, three, 10 clients?
Yeah, wonderful question. Oh, as much as people in their businesses want to act like this is my industry, this is problem is unique to me, and this is only my issue, and other people don't have that issue. There's a certain amount of foundational things that every business needs to have. I would say 70 to 80% of businesses have very similar things that need to be in place, and then there's that extra 20% that's industry specific or offer specific. And I look at it as, when I was a coach and fitness coach, I was getting people to eat their vegetables. And I look at it now that I get businesses to eat their vegetables.
I love it.
Like I just say, you can't beat the fundamentals. You got to have this stuff down. You got to have your vision down, your roles and responsibilities, your org chart, your management, your leadership development. You got to have data that you're tracking that really makes sense. Like you could look at your data and go, okay, now we can make better decisions. And like these things need to be in place. Our processes, we have to make sure that that's all there. And I just go into businesses and get all these vegetables in order so they could go 8 figures and beyond.
I love it. I love it. So, in that scenario, right? Talk us through, I guess, when you first implemented, even for your friend, and then started to kind of expand and maybe get referred out to other businesses. What were the first 4 or 5 ways you discovered what their issues were? Did you go through a pattern of literally one-on-one discovery? Did you have a tool that you were implementing? I know you use EOS and those types of things.
Yeah, great question. So when I work with somebody, I sit down with a founder or CEO for at least 2 hours and really understand what's going on in the business and also to who they are as a person. Because in most organizations, I don't want to say all, but in a vast majority of the organizations, any sort of habits, good or, quote unquote bad habits, they are reflected from the founder into their business or the CEO in their business, right? If the CEO lacks discipline, their business isn't going to be very disciplined. And so I not only try to hear what is going on in a business perspective, but also who they are as individuals, because everything that we do is a reflection of who we are.
Mhm.
And that for me is I want to understand that. And then what I do, and maybe this is a little overkill, but I still like to do it. I interview everybody on the senior leadership team before I work with the company. I really like
Mhm.
to understand what I'm going in there to do. And even if I'm qualified to fix what I think is the problem, like that is true. I think a lot of people want to hire a coach and I'm go great, but like, am I the right coach for you? Are you at the right stage for how I'm doing things and how things could get along? And so I go all in on really understanding them. I do a lot of interviews. How is leadership? What do you feel like the vision is? Tell me the vision in your words. And certain things like that, you could really pick up a lot of little things, because if everybody has a different idea of what makes the company unique, what's our vision and where we're going, how does your role contribute to the growth of the company, and everybody doesn't have somewhat of a similar answer, I know that we have a lot of structural alignment issues, and that's going to be the thing I focus on most. And I just think that is a lot of times our biggest issue, is that we don't have a lot of structure, we don't stick to a certain plan, and people aren't really clear on what they're supposed to be doing.
Hmm. That's amazing. It's interesting having interviewed hundreds and hundreds of CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs. It's almost like the analogy of pushing a rope, right? When you push a rope, that really doesn't work, right? So, because
Yeah,
it gets all tangled up and there's all mishmash. But if you pull a rope, right, it's kind of a straight line, it gets tense, and
yeah.
then all of a sudden everybody gets in line. And it's really amazing to me, but it's really interesting to know that this industry of coaching, executive consulting, all these types of things is out there because we need it, right? Businesses need it, and it's out there, and those that are humble enough to allow an Angelo Sisco to come in, and like you said earlier, doesn't necessarily have to be of the industry. I love a post that you did in LinkedIn, and we talked about that on LinkedIn as a discussion. It doesn't have to be about that industry, but that 70 to 80% has to be true, right? In the way that you do it.
It's like, well, back to what you said first. I think the biggest mistake CEOs and founders and business owners make is not setting accountability for themselves. Because
Mm.
it's really easy to just be that person that walks in and everything has to revolve
I'm the
around them.
boss.
Yeah, totally. And to me, that's what a definition of a business is when it's revolved around one person, and a company revolves around an idea, and
Mm.
everybody's accountable to the idea. And I think
Okay.
when people are wanting, to me, that's the big distinction. A business is about a person, a company is about an idea. And if you really want to grow and scale, you need to make it about an idea, and it's going to require you to be accountable to something and accountable to people in order to do that. And that to me is sometimes the toughest pill for leaders to follow, because they have to stick to something now. They can't just be mavericks and renegades how they like to be.
Awesome. Well, look, leadership is so unique when you think about leadership and management, right? So I'd love your perspective on that. As you've worked with the CEOs and founders, and you've got this mastermind group through Vistage, who's been an incredible organization and what they've put together in these peer groups. What is a distinction, if you go to high level, of what a leader and a manager is doing in those situations?
What a great question. Leadership is modeling, management is coaching.
Mm.
That's how I distinct the two. Leadership is, what am I modeling? Very much like a parent, right? Like your kids can't do, that do as I say, not as I do, that my dad used to tell me never stuck. It didn't really work out too well. And so for me, leadership is about modeling the behaviors that you want in the organization, and management is about coaching people up to their role and their competency that they're supposed to fulfill. And those are the real differences, and they're two different hats. One's about yourself and one is about getting deep with somebody else.
Huh, interesting. You've said a couple things today, idea versus business and this current leadership description and management, right? And I haven't heard it necessarily that way. So it's really cool to have you and share that perspective of it. So, all right, look, one area that we love to talk about on the GO4CEO channel is how kind of what you just talked about, that idea, right? Angelo or Cisco Advisors, became a real business, right? An idea that you have now put out there into the universe. So, what was your first hire? Who was your first hire? I'm sorry, within Cisco Advisors, because ultimately, none of us can get big unless we have some talent around us. So, who was one of the first people that you brought onto the organization as you started to grow?
Yeah, wow. So for me, the first was an assistant. Just really looking at my. One day, I just started writing down for 2 weeks everything that I did, and I gave myself $1 per hour rate, and then I wrote down what I thought those tasks were per hour. And I
Hmm.
realized that I was doing a lot of tasks below my pay grade, and things that someone else could be doing for me and freeing me up to be more of what I need to do, working with the people and all of that sort of stuff. And so for me, having an assistant just freed up another 20 hours a week for me to do what I'm really good at and the things that really drive the business forward, versus me being stuck doing some clerical work that just is important for the business. It needs to get done, but it doesn't need to get done by me for it to get done.
Hmm. And look, did you use any tools from Myers-Briggs to DISC or anything that was the way that you interviewed someone? Because obviously, you being the driver, the leader, the figurehead of the business, and then being able to start to surround yourself with, like you said, maybe that other areas that you don't necessarily want to put your time into, but you need the right people because you don't want it to mess up. So that's why a lot of small business owners, unfortunately, say, well, I do everything the best. And then they get stuck and they don't realize that, hey, it's okay if someone does 85% of what you could do, but now you freed up that 85% of time, right?
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I didn't mention this when I was talking about my offerings. Please forgive me, but I am a Predictive Index certified partner. I use Predictive Index assessment with
Okay.
my clients and also with myself, and just real meta kind of overlook of what I do as far as the Predictive Index is. I am not a person that loves very steady, repetitive work, and I'm also the kind of person that, I mean, this is hard to say out loud sometimes, but it's true. is I'm the person that could get you 80% of the way there. That other 20% crossing the T's and dotting the I's for me is like excruciating pain. It really is. I'm the goal. I'll get you to the red zone, and then I go, good luck. I got it. These other 20, I did 80. If you can't do 20, I can't do nothing for you. You know. And so when I was looking for an assistant, I was looking for somebody that was more steady, more into the details. Was, if someone wants to email me, my favorite emails, just do it in the subject line and hit send. That's my kind of email if you want to talk to me. I'm one of those people. And this is someone that's going to really dig deeper in there because that stuff is important. But just me being able to use that assessment and go, okay, this isn't how I'm wired. And I could, I think when you get assessments, they're very eye-opening, but they're also kind of just like, yeah, I felt that before. And that's how I feel when I have to go through all that drudging kind of stuff and really dig through things. And so when I brought my assistant on, I made, we do PI. I made sure when I was interviewing her that this is, does this feel accurate to you? Does this feel like, tell me how this works and what would you do in this situation? And when I do a lot of interviewing, I do a lot of show me, not tell me. And so I do very interactive interview. Show me how you would do this. Let me just, even if you don't know the software very well, just tell me how you think, show me how you think we would go through this. And really kind of getting their perspective, because when we're interviewing, everyone is giving us the highlight reel, right? And I would rather just learn how you think, because that's what I'm really hiring for, is how you think, not what you did yesterday. And so when I was bringing someone on, it was, we did a whole long predictive index debrief, and I showed them who I was and showed them that these are the things that you could hold me accountable to. Like sometimes for me, I could say this out loud, is I could be a bit impatient, John. I want everything done yesterday, and just, if you ever feel like I'm being, driving a sense of urgency that turns into lack of enthusiasm or empathy, I want you to let me know, because that's a real thing that I'm working on. Is sometimes my ambition could wind up not allowing room for people to be treated like humans. I could forget that they're people and I could just go get this done because I could be ultra task focused. And although that's great for executing, that's just not really good for building a team and creating trust. And so predictive index for me was and is the assessment that I really love to use, and we use it all the time.
Interesting. So some of these tools, would you say that between your mentor and this VC ecosystem that you planted yourself in California, and did you pick those up at those times, or when was it that you started to say to yourself, okay, hey, I've learned something about myself, so now I need to implement these tools to be able to kind of surround myself with something that indicates to me, hey, I'm working with the right person, I'm bringing on the right person, I'm doing the right things, that type of thing.
2018, I learned about predictive index because, man, I was burning through people.
Mm-hmm.
I was burning through people because I thought, I was silly enough to think that everybody was like me, John.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought everybody grew up the way I did, had the same thinking of things. Like we all shared the same book of how we should live life. I was that silly of a person. And then I realized that I was just like burning people out with this intensity and how I was interacting with them. And that also too, understanding that not every role in the businesses that I had required you to be a hard charging maniac. Like you didn't have to be that way if you were just handling my books. Like you didn't need to be this overly ambitious person. You're calculating things. Like just go calculate and make sure it's on time. And
Yeah.
so that for me in 2018 when I learned about predictive index, that's what really got that, because the thing I love about predictive index is not only do I use it if I'm making a hiring decision, I could create a job role. Like let's say I have a job that I need to fill. I could create a target in predictive index that this is the best behaviors for this job. And so when I'm getting applicants, I could filter them through there and go, okay, this person's a good match. They're worth talking to. This person's a good match. They're worth talking to. This one, oh, they'd have a hard time being successful in this role. And so when I was able to see that predictive index not only assessed people, but let me do this for hiring, I was like, this is the assessment for me, because I wanted some more use cases for it, because I've done DISC, I've done Myers-Briggs, I've done Colby. and they're great assessments. But as far as like really applying the information, to me, Predictive Index, it has a tool for hiring. It has a tool for me and you. Let's say you and I were going to work together. This is how we should best communicate. This is how our
Mm,
relationship would work the best. And then it has a tool for the team that's called design. So let's say you have a senior leadership team, and we could look at this team, what they're strong at, what they're weak at, and more importantly, we're like, Angelo, we're trying to have a team. We're trying to grow 20% year over year for the next 5 years, basically double our business. Do we have people that are wired for that on our team, or do we need to
mm.
find people that are, are we stretching that? Because if you have too many steady eddies and you're trying to grow dramatically, that's going to be a real hard push for them, and they're not going to feel good in that situation. When the business is in a growth or stability phase, and depending on how to round that all out. And so PI just felt like the right tool for me when I was using it as a user, and then when I had my practice, I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm adding.
I love it. Yeah. So that, it's very interesting because you can take these tools, right? And ultimately you could read a book, you can attend a seminar, you can go on a webinar, you can be in a virtual, scenario, right? But ultimately, I love that you talked about predictive being and also an implementer, right? An implementation stage of how that, because I've always wondered, big companies spend thousands of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars in consulting, right? With the McKinsey's of the world and all these stuff at the very, very high levels. And who waits around to make sure that these executives implement? From what I've known at companies that I've been in, because I sold my business in '09 and became a banker. I always jokingly say I went from entrepreneur to banker. And it's interesting, the banks that I've been at that have been bigger have spent a lot of money in these consultants. And then unfortunately, what I saw with my eyes was management and leadership never really implemented. They kind of let us be in the minutia and the soup of it, and then nobody drained the soup. Like, nobody ate the soup or really continued it. So it's interesting. I love that you're in this space where you could actually implement and show businesses. So is there a target type of business, maybe from a revenue standpoint or longevity? Do you like to have a C-suite that you could work with, or will you go into the SMB world? Where are you at?
Yeah, for most companies, the bottom range is around the $4 to $5 million, and I've worked with companies up to $100 million. But for me, John, in my heart, I'm most passionate about that $4 to $6 million range, where we got to get our stuff together, and this is we have a real opportunity here, and if we systemize and structure this business, it could really blow through 8 figures. And I love that phase of the business, because I look at it as, when you start off, you're a baby, right? And then you start growing, you get past 7 figures, you're like a teenager, and now it's time to become an adult. And
Yeah.
the definition of an adult is you do what you don't want to do, but you have to do, right? Like, that's when you're an adult, right? When you accept that responsibility, and that phase in the business, that transformation that takes place then is my favorite part of business. I love seeing that evolution, because it is a individual transformation that causes a business transformation at that point in the business, and the individuals need to grow, and they need to step up, and we need to bring on people that are smarter than us, and all of that needs to take place. From an ego perspective, is the stuff that I really live for.
Hmm. It's interesting, that evolution understanding, right? That even I've said this before, there's 9% of businesses ever get to 7 figures. So then you're starting to be in rare air at 5 million, at 20 million, at 100 million, right? And billions is obviously, well, 0.000 something percent. So, but it's uniquely built in a way that, right, there's different reasons of where they're at. From what I know of, and I researched about you and seen your posts, you really work on the individual, right? So that their growth matches the identity that is supposed to bring in a $10 million company, a
Yeah.
$30 million. Because without that identity, you really don't have the temperature, right? I know a guy I watch a lot is Ed Milet, and he always talks about that temperature that you're at, that identity, that you'll never match your income or the level you're supposed to be at if your identity's down here, right? So can you explain a little bit of how you've developed that style?
Yeah, the identity is the perfect word. To me, first, Our biggest superpower as humans is our ability to shift identities. That is why we are the supreme species on planet Earth, is because tomorrow morning you could wake up and you could deliberately be a different person.
Mm.
And when you are transitioning into that range where you're in the low seven figures and trying to get eight figures and beyond, it takes an identity shift, usually of the CEO or founder, of how they're even looking at and approaching their business. When you're in that earlier phase, this is who you are, and when you start growing, you start looking at it to your business as an asset that is a machine, and to start looking at it from that perspective takes a different identity, and it takes a different identity to let go of control. And like you mentioned earlier, you think you're the hero, you could do it, no one could do things better than you, and all of that. And that phase to me is the most important one, because it takes self-awareness, and then it also just takes a lot of habitual change in the way you think, the way you speak, the way you are. I have this little term I call identity alchemy, how to change your identity. It's your thoughts, because your thoughts create your words create your actions, your action repeated create your habits, and your habits create your identity. And so even how you're talking, how you're thinking about your business, how you're thinking about the other people in your business, and then how you're speaking to them, how you're speaking to yourself, and those actions that come forward, that's the stuff that I really love to dig into. It's those little things that some people don't really think about that matter very much, but even using the word like we're going to try to do this or we're going to do this are very different people.
Communicating that is powerful, right? The try versus gonna. So,
Yeah,
so all right. Look, I'm going to wear my commercial banker hat just because I feel like a lot of people in our community of Go4CEO like to understand too. What does it take to start your own advisory? I mean, obviously, you had a piece of success in your life. You were able to go to California and live off of that success, and I mean monetarily, right?
yep.
Speaking, I'm not sure at what point or another you started the spigot of revenue again, but were you an investor in California and then became obviously came back to then run a business? And did you start it with some sort of loan, or did you just bootstrap it? What are some of the dynamics that someone can think about? Like, hey, maybe I just got let go of a job. I'm a C-suite guy. I need to meet, and I want to become an executive coach, or, but man, I don't know if I should take from my 401k or these type of things. So those types of questions at whatever level you want to share.
Sure. So, full transparency, I just shifted my coaching practice when I got to California into other different industries and businesses. So I was earning an income out there. But for
Mm,
me, it was, this entrepreneurship game, this business game is extremely difficult. It's
mhm.
challenging for everybody, and I don't care who you are. And the thing that I really look at is what problem are you trying to solve, and why are you qualified to solve it? And understanding the first question is about getting clear on what you're really passionate about and what you're trying to do, and the second thing is getting clear on your skills and competency to make sure that you could stand in front of people and create value for them. And for me, that's evolved over time, but just understanding more and more about what I'm really good at and being okay with what I'm not good at is important, because I think in the very beginning of my coaching practice, I tried to be everything to everybody.
Mhm.
And that was a trap, right? You just want, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I could do it. And all of a sudden you're like, gosh, I'm a little out of my skis here. You're doing things that you really shouldn't be doing. And so if there's anybody out there, I think it's figuring out what problem you want to solve for who, and then also too, why are you qualified, or what skills do you need to gain to be able to solve it?
Okay. And then how did you formulate your fee structure, right? Are you more of a retainer-based consultant, or do you have some sort of mechanism where it's a monthly MRR? What's the way that you've set up the structure for, the revenue cycle for your business?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a monthly retainer that I work with some clients on. I keep this very limited to about four companies, because when I have a retainer client, I'm very in their business. Like the one write up you saw the other day. That company, I'm coaching three or four different director level leaders inside of their company. I'm very
Mm,
involved in there. And so I keep that relatively low because it does take a lot of my time. And when I'm on retainer, they call me whenever they need me. That's part of the game with what my offering is. As far as my business operating system facilitation, I do a per session fee. I am booked a year in advance to do that, so it's nice to know that those are all there, and I get just deposits for the fees, and that's there. For Vistage, I get a monthly fee as a part of a facilitator, and then when I do Predictive Index, depending on the engagement, we either do workshops, I do hiring for them, helping them find the right people, or we implement the entire software and system with their HR person. And so it's all a little bit different. There's some recurring, and then there's some add-on little bonuses and stuff like that.
Okay, interesting. Well, look, this has been very, very informative. I love hearing kind of the perspective, especially from a guy that's had success in a business that really came from nowhere. Just in a, kind of a struggle within you, your own health, your own fitness. Boom, you create a business off of a trend that was starting to be pre-trending, and really the excitement of that and how you were placed at the right time in the right place. And then you've learned through this VC network, and then your friend brings you back. And ultimately, you have had your own deposits that you've made, right? The investments that you've made in yourself and Go4CEO community, that's a trick. That's a secret sauce, right? Deposit. He became a predictive analytics. You said certified, right?
Yeah.
He went through the EOS system. He connected with Vistage and learned what that program was about, and then became a facilitator. Like, this is where you keep on changing, and like we talked about at the beginning, renewing yourself, changing paradigms so that you could shift into a different way and be valuable to the marketplace. So really, really awesome stuff. So, all right. Hey, look, we end our Go4CEO interviews with CEO. So client experience. And I know you have 4 or 5 different branches of your business and Cisco Advisors and Vistage that you bring people through, but I'd love to hear, what does that client experience look like from a value proposition? If you take 30, 60 seconds to share what that looks like when people come to do business with Cisco Advisors and the Vistage program.
Yeah, I'm so grateful at this point in my journey, John, that I work with people that I really want to work with. And so the first meeting is usually, a 20 to 30-minute chat. And then I probably spend 2 or 3 other meetings just really getting to know people and really feeling like we have a great connection. It's not very linear. Like, I don't have a step-by-step process. I kind of just let it unfold in the way that it should. I just got off a call with somebody, and next week we're going for a ruck in the forest at 6 o'clock in the morning to get to know each other
All
better,
right.
and like really spending time with people, because in my business, and I think in every business, but specifically in my business, it's paramount that we have trust. That we have trust, because my job is to hold a mirror up to you. And if you are not going to allow this relationship to unfold that way, I'm just not going to be fighting with you to change. This is
Mhm.
built on change. And so I probably have, as far as my Vistage, we have an intro, we have 3 or 4 other meetings, and then I have them meet some of my other members, and have my other members even say, go out for coffee with this guy and let me know if you think this guy will be a good fit for our culture. And then
Hmm.
we invite someone to the group. For me, I'd rather, they have the saying, hire slow and fire fast. I do the same thing with work.
Well, and I think it's interesting, right? Because you placed yourself in a situation where you have earned the right to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a fear in some people, especially if, whatever, they got laid off or they get into pressure situations. I recently did a master class with options trading, and the guy says, it's a buddy of mine, former bank executives on LinkedIn a lot, and he talks about, he's like, people will call me and be like, hey, I really need to learn how to options trade because I just lost my job, and I want to make money. And he's like, nah, I'm good. Like, you're not the right person right now because you're gonna make stupid decisions. Right? You're
Yeah.
gonna you're gonna act in ways that you shouldn't. So I think a lot of times, executive coaching, consulting, these types of things can be built almost as a side business a lot of times. And tell me if I'm wrong, but you could be having a mainstay of things, and it's interesting. You could really develop something on the side, and then eventually maybe go full time in that. But I think there's a lot of pressure when you have a lot of things in your life, a lot of debt, or a lot of these things that are pressuring you, that it may not be a good time, and you may not be the great greatest person to be able to do that at that time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think something like that I do is the foundation of it needs to be service and not money if you're going to
Hmm.
do this really well. And so, like you mentioned, if this starts off as a part-time gig and you kind of build it up there and you get more comfortable from there, because at the end of the day, like filling your heart up with service is why I do this. I love doing this. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the financial, gifts that I get for this and all of that, but really just making sure, am I doing this from a place of service, because people could tell right away if you're not doing it from that aspect, and that doesn't feel really good in a relationship.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. There was always that dichotomy, right? Of hey, I want to do it from the heart, but do you know how to truly express it from the heart and give that genuineness, and then also ask for the dollar, right?
Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, you got to get paid at times, right? So, unless you're independently wealthy, I guess, and doing it for charity, right? So,
sure.
there are some pro bono things out there, but awesome stuff, brother. So, all right. So we went through client experience. E is for engagement. Angelo, we'd love to know, how does Angelo engage? And I mean with your clients, with your family, with your friends. Like, are you a man, let's go out to eat and just enjoy a time? You just talked about one right now. You're going to go ruck at 6 in the morning with someone. Like, what is engagement look like for you?
My, oh gosh, I have a few different things. All right, so my first favorite is any sort of what I would call self care, working out, sauna, gym, and going for rucks, anything like that. I'm always first and ready to go to do that. I'm Italian, and so I love to eat. I just can't get enough of going out and eating. And this is my last thing. I don't tell everybody this, but I do. Is I love to dance. It is one of my favorite things to put on some house music and just have a good time and dance and cut the rug. And so you said with anybody. And so, yeah, we do that too. We do plenty of dancing in my house.
All right, well, there's a charity event that's coming up in a couple weeks. I might have to invite you to this. It's all house music, hip hop, right? A buddy of mine's
Yeah.
raising money for his Filipino foundation for baseball. Really cool. So I'll text you on the down low. So, but awesome stuff. I love that, man. It's so cool. And I'm Hispanic and Italian, and like I love dancing, and that's one thing I miss a lot sometimes. My wife never really kind of gravitated to that,
Yeah.
but certainly when I get in that environment, recently went to a Christmas Eve party of my Guatemalan friend, and it was dancing and stuff. And I'm always in that element, so it's really cool. All right, so the last one is operational excellence. You've talked about the way you teach operations and EOS and these types of things. What are some of the tools? Just give us a clue of what does Cisco advisors use? From a CRM to from daily activities. Is there notebooks that you use? Those types of things. Are you old school? Just write things down. What are you using in your business?
Yeah. I don't think I'm too technologically advanced, but here I'll give you what I got. So we use HubSpot as a CRM. I just think that has the most capabilities, and you could grow into it really well. I use HubSpot as a CRM. As far as AI goes, we use either ChatGPT or Claude, depending on the task and things we need to do. And I'm still kind of simple. I still run a lot of stuff on Google, just like with our Drive and doing all of that. And then we use a software called 90.io for our business as far as structuring our business. Like our business operating system lives on 90.io. It's a software company that creates business operating system software. And then I also have a Remarkable for note taking.
Hmm. Okay, awesome. Well, look, it's been a great experience to have you on. I think a lot of people will glean a lot of information from what you shared today. And ladies and gentlemen, let's have Angela share with us, like, what is the best way to get a hold of you? Somebody wants to engage with Cisco advisors or join your Vistage group, or at least, be interviewed for it. What is the best and, most possible way to connect with you?
Yeah, first, I feel like I never thought it would, but LinkedIn has really been the social platform that I've probably used the most. So I would say LinkedIn or my website is the best ways to find me.
Awesome. And the website is?
CiscoAdvisors.com.
CiscoAdvisors.com. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Look, by the way, go pick up the book, The 4A Formula, Untangle Any Challenge, and Think Like a CEO. I've had hundreds of CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs like Angelo. Bonus chapters are all about these guys and gals that have shared their wisdom with me, my own stories, my soccer, involvement and all that type of stuff. So check it out and subscribe to the channel. Become a Go4CEO community member and be a part of our movement that's growing along with the 4A formula. So, Angelo, thanks so much for being on the Go4CEO channel.
Pleasure, brother. Thank you so much.